From some huge punches to the most gruesome injuries, these are the times that UFC fighters shocked everyone. Number 9. The Hendo Bomb. We all love The Ultimate Fighter, and one of the best things about the show has to be the rivalries between coaches. Dan Henderson and Michael Bisping gave us one of the best fights ever before their fight at UFC 100. Bisping talked a lot of crap before the fight, so it's fair to say that Henderson was really looking forward to finally meeting him in the octagon. The pair put on a brilliant first round, but in the second, Bisping ran into Henderson's trap. Dan caught the Englishman with a massive right hand, one of the greatest one-punch knockouts ever in UFC history and a truly shocking punch. Bisping said he couldn't even remember the fight and thought it hadn't happened yet. Ouch. And speaking of some painful moments, number 8. Frank Mir breaks Big Nog's arm. This was one of the most iconic UFC fights ever, but it was over in the blink of an eye. It went down in December 2011 between Minotauro Nogueira and Frank Mir. Big Nog took control of the fight early on, getting in some big punches and eventually dropping Frank. Nogueira started pouring huge shots, and Mir looked completely unconscious. Nog went for the guillotine, but this turned out to be a big mistake as Frank quickly rolled and managed a Chimera lock. Not only did Frank win the fight, but he actually broke Nogueira's arm. That has to be the most intense 3 minutes in UFC history and an unbelievable injury to go with it. Speaking of short fights, number 7. Masvidal knocks Ben Askren out. Jorge Masvidal had an amazing career in the UFC, but his most shocking moment came the day he faced Ben Askren. Askren was sure he was going to win and even said that he would dominate Masvidal. Sadly for Ben, that never happened, because Masvidal knocked him out pretty much instantly. An amazing flying knee from Masvidal just 5 seconds into the fight was enough to knock Askren out cold. To this day, it remains the fastest KO in UFC history, and that's far from the only crazy knockout on this list. Number 6. Lyoto Machida is the Karate Kid. Machida faced Randy Couture back in April 2011 with a title shot against John Jones on the line. Things were looking good for Lyoto, so he decided to go for something unconventional. He took Randy out with a beautiful flying front kick to the head. This was only the second front kick knockout ever, just a few months after Anderson Silva scored the first. But this was the first time somebody did it in the air in pure Karate Kid fashion. Who knows? Maybe Lyoto watched the film for inspiration the night before. But talking about legendary knockouts, number 5. McGregor knocks out Aldo. McGregor's rise was unique. The Irishman made a lot of noise on his way to the top. The crazy trash talk, his flamboyant style, and his amazing confidence made him the most popular MMA fighter in history. Of course, much of the old school had seen hype trains before, so they suspected that Conor would eventually face a real opponent and crash out. Many believed Jose Aldo was the man for the job. The Brazilian was the UFC's only ever featherweight champion, and he had won every fight since the division was created 4 years earlier. Aldo had stopped hype trains before, and it looked like he would do it again. However, we all know what really happened next. 13 seconds and one punch were enough for Conor to send Jose flying. It was a shocking moment in UFC history and one that fans will never forget. Speaking of unforgettable fights, can you remember this one? Number 4. Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg. We're going way back for this epic moment. Trigg and Hughes are two of the biggest names from the early 2000s. They fought for the second time at UFC 52 in April 2005. In the first round, Trigg landed a big shot on Hughes' groin, but somehow the ref didn't see it. Trigg went on to take him down, delivering a massive beating and coming very close to securing a rear naked choke. But Hughes wasn't having it, and he managed the impossible. He stood up and walked Trigg all the way across the octagon before putting him down with a massive body slam. It looked straight out of WWE. Hughes then secured his own choke and defeated Trigg with an insane submission. It was an epic comeback and one of the most shocking moments ever in the UFC. But still, nothing can beat our top 3. Number 3. UFC 229. UFC 229 was the biggest event in UFC history. The build-up to the fight between Khabib and McGregor was beyond anything the UFC had seen. Conor insulted just about every aspect of Khabib's life, but Nurmagomedov wouldn't let him into his head and was always ready with stone-faced and confident replies. Things got serious when McGregor attacked Khabib's team bus after UFC 223, Khabib's blood was already boiling. Nurmagomedov dominated Conor on fight night, but he was disappointed when Conor tapped out early. The Russian was furious, and he was hungry for more. So after submitting Conor, he decided to jump on McGregor's team. At the same time, Khabib's team decided to attack Conor, who was still recovering on the canvas. Things got seriously out of control. Both fighters were temporarily suspended, but Khabib got the worst of it when half of his payment was withheld. Was that fair? I don't know, but it was definitely shocking. Just like our next entry, probably the most shocking comeback ever. Number 2, Jake Congo versus Pat Barry. When we think of shocking moments, this is often the first one that comes to mind. It's probably fair to say that both Congo and Barry are best remembered for this moment, which went down in UFC history. The fight got off to a crazy start, with Pat Barry landing a massive right hook on Congo's head. That was enough to send him straight to the ground, where Barry kept hitting Congo hard. The fight looked like it was over, but somehow the Frenchman managed to get up. Congo was up for a second before another huge right sent him straight back to the canvas. This had to be the end. The crowd couldn't believe Congo was still alive, never mind still in the game. But Congo somehow made it back to his feet yet again and struck Barry twice with 2 perfect shots. More than enough to knock Pat into the next century. An amazing moment that shocked UFC fans all over the world, but not as much as this gruesome injury. Number 1, Anderson Silva's leg. For a long time, Anderson Silva was undefeatable. Silva was the UFC middleweight champion of the world, and he was on a 16-fight winning streak. That's the longest undefeated streak ever in the UFC, but it all ended the night he faced Chris Weidman. The pair first met at UFC 162. Silva was extremely cocky coming into the fight. He lowered his guard, danced around Weidman, and pretended that Chris's punches didn't hurt him. But lowering your guard in pro MMA isn't a good idea. Weidman stayed focused and made the most of Silva's showboating, eventually knocking the champion out. Weidman was the new UFC middleweight champion. Luckily for Silva, he got a title shot against Weidman just a few months later. It was the perfect moment to redeem himself, but things just didn't work out according to plan. The fight provided one of the most shocking moments ever in the promotion. Weidman was better in the first round, but it was the second round that made everybody's jaw drop. Weidman checked a low kick from Silva, and the consequences were horrible. Silva's leg snapped and went completely the wrong way.
He broke his leg. Anderson fractured his crazy ending. It went limp. It snapped right in half.
Much like Corey Hill years ago, Joe.
Completely limp. You can see it dangle.
It's a shocking image we can't unsee, and that's exactly why it tops our list. From some huge punches to the most gruesome injuries, those were the times that UFC fighters shocked everyone.